The first session, and sorry you're going to be bombarded by me today for quite a few of the sessions, is about this role clarity. About as parents, and I know we've got some coaches in here as well, but if we take it from the parents' perspective, exactly what's expected of us, what should we do, what could we do, why do we do some of the things that we do, and ultimately it's about understanding our role within the partnership. Now, a lot of the research will just say about, it's obvious, as parents, unconditional love and support. And these words are used in research all over the place. But quite often, we're thinking about a sporting journey, and we see our children as athletes and not as human beings sometimes. And it's very easy to be swept along by that, he is a rugby player, she is a basketball player, rather than, she's Lucy, he's Benjamin, in my case. Because all my friends talk about how's he doing at Newcastle. All my friends ask about how Lucy's doing. They don't say, is she happy? Is she enjoying school? Is she, active? Her friends, how is he doing at rugby? How's she doing? So quite often the sporting journey and this sporting landscape can push us into a slightly different zone of parenting. And there's lots of positive and negatives found in the research. And this is what research papers look like. They're the most boring things you could ever read and assimilate and go through, but the messages there are absolutely fantastic. These are all different studies from different sports where they've interviewed parents, they've interviewed players and interviewed the coaches and tried to find out what are some of the negatives that are happening from the parents' perspective. And it's things like living the life through the child, unfair expectations, putting so much pressure on them, never switching off. Again, treating their child as an athlete, not as a person. So in the car on the way home, how did you play today? What are your performance objectives? What things did you do well? What did you not do well? Instead of switching into parent mode, what do you want for tea? Have you got any homework to do, etc., etc. So there's loads of great research out there. There's also research in there about the actual youngsters. How do they feel? How do they feel when they see the parents talking to the coaches and arguing? How do they feel just when they see the parents stood on the sideline, depending on the body language, or shaking their head, nodding, gesticulating, whatever they're doing? And we'll come into this later, but there's a huge evidence bank, and we've put this all in a folder. If you do want to have a look through them, it is fascinating from other sports. Every sport is different, every context is different, cycling is different, but there's some good information we can learn from all the other sports so we don't make the same mistakes. Because performance sport, it is a very strange environment. The expectations, the pressure, the time, financial resources, and it's almost like you don't want to not get involved because you don't want to let your son or daughter down. And it is all about this parent-child bond. Especially 13, 14, this is all changing. And quite often as a parent, we can feel sidelined, we can feel excluded when we see our son or daughters, talking to the coaches, laughing and joking, spending time with them. And it is a difficult transition. We can, if we look at some of these images, feel like the coach is just pulling our son or daughter along. They're driving everything, the direction that they're going. It can be that they're almost seen in the background pulling all the strings. They're the safety net. They're the person that your son or daughter goes to whenever they've got an issue. And they should be coming to see me as the parent. And it's very, very difficult. In a lot of sports, they say that the coach's role now is almost like a co-driver or a navigator. And they are facilitating the path of your son or daughter through this sporting journey. And ultimately, the worst case scenario is you and the coach could be going in totally different directions because of your expectations and their expectations. And poor Max, do you ever feel like this? Sometimes it can be the words, the language. There is acronyms in sport and in education, and it's terrible. And do you understand what all these different like secret languages code is? And it can be very difficult. But it's not just the parent and the athlete and the coach having conflict. It can be lots of other things happening in the young person's life because of school, friendship, boyfriends, girlfriends, financial difficulties, etc. But Smith, Small and Smith said, actually what we need to create is this athletic triangle. It's not a partnership, we're not on a tandem. It is all about the coach, the performer and the parent working together to try and get the best possible athletic performance. And this triad, this three-way exchange, these are comments from a research project that I did, which happened to be with golfers. And when they were talking about what was happening within England golf, they talked about it's like a secret club. You know, down at the bottom, you know, I feel quite often that we are manipulated into doing things, into going places, into paying for certain coaches. Quite often it feels like everything's done and all decisions are made behind closed doors. Sometimes it's all about power. We think these people are doing it because they just want to show that they can make decisions and have the power. And what we're trying to do today is hopefully that won't happen in future. And we're trying to make sure that all three of us are cycling in the same direction. Now, obviously, at different points in the journey, you know, the coach might be at the front, or the coach might be at the back, or the coach in the middle. You know, different people might be pedaling harder at different times in this journey. There'll be ups and downs. Sometimes your role as a parent is going to be absolutely crucial. Sometimes they might need some more technical advice and guidance from the coach. Sometimes it's going to be the ownership of your son or daughter that is going to have to drive this. They're going to have to do all the legwork. Yeah, and it's just hopefully from today we can get more of a situation where we're aligned. Because like De La Soul, I'm showing my age now, I wanted music blasting out, 3's the magic number. It's all down to these 3 C's. And some of your comments earlier were very poignant. We need to be clear. There's been lots of changes in British cycling. Who does what? You know, we've had, you know, huge turmoil, you know, different structures, communication. You know, we know where to find the information. It could be better, as some of the comments that I've just heard. You know, we need to be able to find things easier. And then down at the bottom, this coherence. What's expected of us as behaviours, as actions? And if we can align this so we all know who's responsible for what, obviously your son or daughter's experience might not be the outcome, they may not get the gold medals, but the experience whilst they're in this talent pathway is going to be so much better, and that's what we're all after. So there is loads and loads of good information out there. A lot of it is easily accessible on the internet, through websites, working with parents in sport, but there's a lot of books as well here. We've got Jerry Lynch, we've got Gordon McClelland, very, very good. We've got John O'Sullivan, you've got Reed Maltby. There's a lot of people who are out there trying to help parents understand the process of elite sport development and support this journey. There's lots of blogs out there, podcasts, and of course there is empirical research. Van Mullen and Co. And you might have heard things like helicopter parents that just drop in, shout and scream, you know, you're doing it terrible, you know, you're horrible as a coach, and then disappear again. Okay, but Van Mullen and Co. put some sort of typography together and said, well, you know, look at these. Do you recognise yourselves in any of these? Are you very much performance focused? Times, numbers, splits? Probably you were all the financial influencer. If you think about the bikes that I saw being wheeled in today, amazing. The fact that you got to travel all around the country. You know, taxi driver, I know, you know, a lot of you may feel like this, especially if you've got no understanding of the sport. Submissive bystander, you're just there, you have to be there. It's too far to go and do the shopping and come back, so I may as well just stand here and watch. In football, the verbal abuser we've probably all seen on television, and in rugby league and in some other sports, you know, this is very prevalent. Even in tennis I've seen it happen. We've got the seasoned veteran, you know, the fact that you've had children that have gone through the pathway, you can become a fantastic mentor for other parents that might have questions and there might not be a coach around, but, you know, if people know that you've been part of the process and you understand it, you could be a really, you know, place for some information and support for parents. Emotionally driven. I've seen a lot of parents who are really emotionally invested in the success of their children. Okay, but they are not you. They are not, you know, a little mini-me that we'll go on to later. And finally, you know, the clock watcher, you know, they've got to get to the next appointment, they've got to get them to the next place. So there is this typology coming. Now, the best bit of research was about Celia Brackenridge, who came out with this little questionnaire that we got you to do at the beginning, which tried to work out what type of parent, what actions, what behaviours were very common amongst thousands and thousands and thousands of sports parents. So she came up with that little questionnaire that we've done, and there is a score sheet here. And what I'd like you to do, at the top of each box, it has a number. If you've answered one of the ones from this column, you give yourself 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points. Gentleman over there was ahead of the game. He actually had the score sheet, so he picked all the best answers straight away. So if I just hand these out, and then if you could just score them, that would be brilliant. We'll just put... Oh yeah, give him a bit of time. Yeah, crack on. Crack on.
In each column then?
No. But so for instance, if you put that one, so if you look to see where that 13. So I Vinny has, yeah, exactly, the 4 C's, but it doesn't link in with De La Soul if it had the music playing. That's the problem. But no, you're dead right. Yeah, consistency, because there's nothing worse, is there? Especially with me and my wife. Even if you take the coach out of the equation, she tells them one thing, I tell them something else. You know, she behaves a certain way and I behave a different way. How confusing for our children. So we've had to be really careful as we've grown up. Also, grandparents. I mean, later we'll get onto a story about that, but you know, we had to manage, you know, Ben's grandparents who were doing the childcare for us. Absolutely wonderful, but the messages that they were giving him were very different, especially when we talk about growth mindset, and it had a massive negative impact, and we had to work with them and try and get them to use slightly different words, ask them to do slightly different things, and gradually they really improved. But yeah, that consistency needs to be everywhere. Are we okay with, this is the bit where you get to shout and say, no, it's terrible, it's wrong, all the research is rubbish. So what she said is we can come up with different categories, and where we would love us to be is somewhere in this middle zone as parents. And she labelled them these reactive, active and proactive parents. She said we really don't want to be hyperactive, shouting and screaming, and the whole of our life depends on how well our child does. And ultimately, we don't want to be opposed. No, my son's not going to ride a bike. But you know, more realistically, inactive. You know, I'm not going to really learn much about it. We're talking to the converted because you've all turned up today, so we wouldn't expect anybody to be there. But she said it's a nice framework that we had, and we came up to these scores. So if you were 15 to 23, this is where she would say that probably you are critical of the child's involvement in the sport. It's maybe not what you would like them to do. You'd probably like them to play a different sport or be involved in something slightly different. If you are 24 to 38, you're probably happy to drop them off, pick them up from sessions, but maybe don't know how to yet support their development away from race day, training day, etc. This reactive, active and proactive is probably the best zone to be in. Not sure how best to support your child's involvement, more comfortable reacting, especially if the coaches ask you to do some things, you will do it. If you're asked to help with nutrition, you'll do it. If you're asked to get them there at a certain time, you'll do it. The next one down, active, you've got the required knowledge to support your child, happy to experience the development with them. So you might read up, you might be, you know, sports professionals, education professionals, management professionals, you understand a lot of the concepts, you're helping them with their development all the time. You might be cyclists, ex-cyclists, so you can help and support as well. Down at the bottom, full commitment and advocacy. You proactively seek to support your child's development through a variety of ways. And again, just by coming today, we would suggest that you're probably moving towards that proactive area. Hyperactive, we see this more, I guess, in football. Your child's sporting development is at the centre of your current routine. You'll do almost anything to help them achieve the required status, often leads to overly vocal involvement on the pitch, track, court side. I've seen people plan the whole of the holidays around the child's competition programme. I've heard them cancel, you know, work meetings because they need to go and pick a child up and drop them off again. I've heard them, you know, not go to family parties, birthdays and everything else because it's more important, and this was from 7, 8 and 9-year-olds, that their child is seen, and that's what it is, a lot of the ego side, their child is seen to be at the event, seen to be part of a squad, seen to be wearing the kit, seen to be doing well. Now, obviously, it's a very personal thing that you've put down, and yes, she suggests that we need to be in this middle zone would be better, but everyone's individual. The context is different, cycling is different, your children are different. You may, because you are the second best person at knowing what they're thinking and what they're feeling, you may know that if you get involved, your child will rebel against that and not go to places. So if you push and push and push, they'll just stop doing it. Likewise, you may have an incredibly laid back, placid child, and you know that unless you are the energy behind them, the drive, that they've got so much potential, and maybe they won't even get to the starting line because they just don't have that inner drive and passion themselves. So everything is context specific, everything is individual, and likewise the support that you need for your son or daughter will be slightly different. But it's an interesting activity to do, and I think the best thing of this is actually doing this with your son or daughter and seeing if they pick the same statements as you. And we have a slightly different one for the performers to fill in. You know, my father or mother or guardian thinks this, X, Y, and Z, and then see if you come up with the same ones. So, because it is individual, we appreciate that emotional support, financial support that we've said, time, is one of those things that you offer. But support can mean totally different things to different people. We need to know as British Cycling, what support do you need as parents? But ultimately, that only works if the support that you offer to your son or daughter is effective. If I bring it a little bit back more to a personal level now, about this idea about individualised support. So we've said that, you know, all your sons and daughters are different. On the different sections of the donut, you've put things that are meaningful for you, for your son or daughter that you need. And quite often, you know, one of the tasks is, okay, if you're not a parent in this performance sport environment, how would you label yourself? And if you had to label yourself, you know, would you then give yourself a mission of what your role would be? As my children have got older, my role has changed. I'd almost say now, because of what I do, I'm probably like a performance consultant for my son. Because, you know, the nutrition, the sleep, how important sleep is, you know, the guidance about, you know, some of the mental skills training that he's been asked to do by Newcastle, some of the physical stuff that he's asked to do as well. I can just be, you know, a listening one. Dad, what do you think? I'm going to do this. I'd like to change, you know, the amount that I'm doing this, that and the other. What do you think? I don't go to him. He always waits for him to come to me. He'll show me what his plans are. We'll have a chat about it. So I've almost become like a performance consultant. And my role is to support him in his personal development, however he wants. When he was younger, I mentioned the story about the grandparents, I was probably the class clown because that's what I had to be. And my role was to engage him and get him to participate. Because we had wonderful grandparents and he'd go back after school and nursery and they were just bombarding him with, isn't he good at reading, isn't he great at writing, you know, what an amazing drawer he is, isn't he fantastic at painting, isn't he brilliant at this? And then he'd come and hand them over, oh, you know, look what Benjamin's done today, he's brilliant at this, brilliant at that, brilliant all the rest of it. And then we started seeing if we were taking him to new environments, he'd just take a step back. I'd go on, have a go, and he just wouldn't. And we just couldn't work out why, you know, this little boy, you know, just wouldn't engage. And it was only when we started like thinking all the Carol Dweck stuff about mindsets, you know, he didn't want to try something new or go into a different environment in case he wasn't brilliant, because he thought he'd let us down. He thought that it would mean he was a bad person. Fear of failure. You know, we need to give him the gift of fear of failure. Give a gift of failure. And it took a long, long time saying to the parents, look, grandparents, thank you very much for doing all this, but, you know, could you just, you know, say, you know, it's lovely this picture that you've done because you've spent loads of time, you've put loads of effort into it, you've used lots of different colours, you've been very creative in your design, and start praising process rather than the outcome. Isn't he fantastic? And it took about a year. And I was the class clown going to everywhere, you know, follow me, hey! You know, happy and stupid and running around, just trying to get him to engage in all these different sports and activities. So again, you know your children at their life stage. Again, it's a very personal thing. You don't need to have a chat with anybody else. But if you could just spend a minute or two, if you're not a parent, you know, you might be a friend, you know, you might be a facilitator, a consultant, a taxi driver. What would you be, and what would your personal mission be for your son or daughter? If you could just have a few minutes to think about that, that'd be brilliant. This is another thing to consider on this our role as parents and what we understand. It's called Mini-Me. All that we'd like you to do is try and think about these little questions as if it was your son or daughter answering them. So again, you can just close your eyes, you know, zone out a little bit, or switch the lights off. But, you know, I love cycling because, how would they answer that? My favourite cycling memory is, a follow-up question might be why. I want to get better because. The most important thing for me to do to get better is, It helps me when my mum, dad, guardian do X, Y, and Z. I get frustrated when my mum, dad, or guardian does this or doesn't do that. I love that one. My mum and dad would describe me as, after yesterday, my wife would describe Benjamin in ways that we can't repeat. But my coach thinks my parents is, which is interesting about what their window is on how they think you interact with the club coach or any of the other coaches. My coach wants me to work on improving. Hopefully as a parent you can answer that really, really quickly. And the next stage in my development is, would they be able to answer that at this current point in time? So again, if you just have a minute or two, just think through these ones. The important elements of this, again, if you want to do those types of things, was it easy? Did you have all the answers straight away? Didn't have to think about them? Interestingly, if you're already, are these the types of conversations that you've had and you understand with your son or daughter? If you have, how have you done it? Is it in the car on the way home, which is probably not the best time to do it? Why did you do it? Why haven't you done it? That might be a more pertinent question about those. So these are just things to consider as our role as parents, the level of understanding, because we can't put support in place if we don't know exactly what our youngsters need. And it is difficult, where do you fit? And quite a few of you have mentioned other sports. Every sport is complex, a whole range of stakeholders. A gentleman here mentioned about PE teachers. This was a study done all about this athletic talent development environment. Henriksen, Larson did it on football clubs. And they came out with macro and micro environments and all sorts of other people that play a part in the young person's development. Where do you fit as a parent within that? And we've said, how do you interact with a coach? These are all things that we're going to continue to explore during the day.